Konnichiwa, cultists. We're officially in October. Breathe and relax. Unless you're in the States, of course, in which case it's probably time to panic like you live in a city in the path of a kaiju stampede. But that aside, it's time to chill and come with us on a journey into the world of cult cinema. And if you are stateside right now, then take some time out with us and hopefully calm your nerves a little. So welcome everyone, not only to the final episode in our Kaiju crossover, but also to the first ever silver screen month of monsters. Maybe the last, depending how it goes. Yes, it's October, and you know what that means? Halloween, Christmas for weirdos. And we couldn't just do a Halloween special this year, though heads up, we're gonna. No, this time we wanted to do something really special, so you lucky people, over the course of the next 5 weeks, Silver Screen is going weekly as we delve into the world of monsters, both large and small, extraterrestrial and the all too close to home. So this is your official invitation to join us on Cult Classics, as well as on Mike Cinema Classics and Silver Screen regular flavour, as we go all company-wide crossover for this one. And this episode we're going to kick things off with arguably one of the most well-known monsters of all, because not only is a special month for us, but it's also his birthday. 70 years old, if you can believe that. That's right, we're looking at the most famous kaiju to raise his head from the ocean, the king of the monsters himself, Godzilla, or Gojira. And what else could we cover this time around other than the Big Galoot's first ever appearance, the 1954 original? So come with us as we delve into the one that kicked it all off. As always, I'm not alone for this. I'm joined by my regular co-host, the header to my Mothra. It's Mr. Mike Wilson.
Hello, hi. Yes, my favourite part of the movie was when Jean Reno did his Elvis Presley impression. Really
Don't even go there, dude.
Wait, did I watch the wrong movie? Oh no.
The wrong movie for anything.
In so many ways.
Yes. How are you doing, fella?
I'm doing okay, yeah. I did not actually watch Godzilla from 1990, whatever it was, although I did see that at the time. More's the pity. But yes, I'm ready to talk all things Godzilla.
You've been waiting for this one a while, yeah?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know me, I'm a huge... Well, more and more I'm getting into kaiju. I'm a huge fan of all things, definitely Japanese, tokusatsu, and that kind of area. But it was always kind of difficult to find a lot of the... certainly the Godzilla films, although this one was one I did happen to already have before we decided to review it, because it's a classic, innit?
Yeah. Well, normally, we bandy about what's the favourite cult movie and that kind of thing, but obviously, you've been here time and time again, so we've already covered that. So I'm going to ask you, was this the first kaiju movie you saw? And if not, what was the first kaiju movie you saw? And what about it was it that captured your interest? Which 50-foot tall monster popped your cherry, should it?
It depends what you're classing, because I definitely would have seen, obviously, American versions of Godzilla and stuff probably first, before I'd seen any of the Japanese ones, although it's weird, because the whole kind of kaiju thing's vague in my head. I'm pretty certain that this wasn't the first one I ever saw, but I never really sort of sat and watched them actively. It was always because they used to actually show these things on TV, believe it or not, although it was often random times during the day or late at night or whatever. So I'm sure it was probably something from like a random point in the Reiwa or the Showa era of Godzilla that I just saw and was like, ooh, that looks interesting. He's fighting, I don't know, a big spider or something, or a gas cloud. So I probably just sat and watched it when I was too young on TV or something, but I could not tell you what the very first one was.
Oh, fair enough. Because I think mine was, and again, it was like you when you mentioned that they showed them late night on TV. I'm sure at the time it was Channel 4, and I could swear it was Destroy All Monsters.
Okay.
So I was kind of. I was kind of into that, but I'll come to that in a bit. So what I'm going to say is, the one that causes us to fall in love with the genre is frequently the one, we look back with the fondest memory. Is that the case for you? Being your first exposure, can you remember the first one, and does it remain a favourite, or has it been usurped by another over the years? So, hit me with your favourite kaiju movie and why.
Well, you know me. I like all things kind of like I said, tokusatsu, the kind of things in suits genre, is what ultimately birthed Power Rangers, which I'm still a fan of despite my age. So I got into kind of Japanese culture that way, kind of backwards because I watched the adapted version and then watched the kind of Super Sentai that led to Power Rangers, and through there it was like, oh, this is actually a whole genre, and there's other TV shows like Kamen Rider or the Metal Hero stuff, and then you find out there's movies, and then you realize, oh, that's actually the Godzilla movies. They're the kaiju is ultimately, it's just another sort of form of the tokusatsu genre. So that was probably how I first came to it. Was probably through as a kid watching dubbed Japanese or refilmed Japanese into kids movie type or kids TV show type stuff. The only thing I can remember other than that, which has just come to me now as we were discussing it, is that the very first one that I ever saw, I do remember involved Gamera, because I thought it was the coolest thing ever, because it was probably around the time I was a huge Ninja Turtles fan. And Gamera is just basically, let's be honest, a giant Ninja Turtle. So
Yeah.
like, ooh, giant turtle with like people living in his back and stuff. This is cool.
Yeah, we'll get back to taking a look at the one that kicked the whole thing off, as it were. And I humbly beg your forgiveness in advance, dear listener, should I mispronounce any names going forward this episode. I do have the tendency to trip over my own tongue, so warning out of the way, here we go. Gojira, or Godzilla to us in the West, is a 1954 Japanese kaiju film directed and co-written by Ishiro Honda, with special effects by Tsuburaya and produced and distributed by Toho. It's the first film in the Godzilla franchise in which a giant monster appears whose attacks trigger fears of a nuclear holocaust in post-war Japan. Now, Godzilla pioneered a form of special effects called suitmation, in which a stunt performer wearing a suit interacts with miniature sets. Tsuburaya originally proposed for a giant octopus before the filmmakers decided on a dinosaur-inspired creature. The movie entered production through Toho after the Japanese-Indonesian co-production of In the Shadow of Glory collapsed due to anti-Japanese sentiment in Indonesia. Now, this caused the Indonesian government to deny visas for the Japanese filmmakers. After unsuccessful negotiations, producer Tomoyuki Tanaka flew back to Japan, and during the said flight he conceived the idea for a giant monster movie. Now, principal photography took place over 51 days, with special effects photography running for 71 days, and it premiered in Nagoya on October 27, 1954, with a nationwide release shortly after on November the 3rd. It was met with mixed reviews upon release, but was a box office success, winning the Japanese Movie Association Award for Best Special Effects. The film earned 183 million yen in distributor rentals, making it the 8th highest grossing Japanese film of the year. And in 1956, a heavily re-edited Americanized version titled Godzilla King of the Monsters was released in the US. The film spawned a multimedia franchise that was recognised by Guinness World Records as the longest running film franchise in history. The character Godzilla has since become an international pop culture icon. The film and Tsuburaya have been largely credited for establishing the template for the aforementioned tokusatsu media. The film has also received reappraisal in later years and has since been regarded as one of the best monster movies ever made. And as we always say, this movie can currently be found on various streaming platforms dependent on your location, as well as being available to purchase in physical format. Now, this is a weird one for me. I have seen it several times, but I cannot for the life of me pin down a memory of when I first saw it. I've seen both this one and the US edit with Raymond Burr, but aside from the obvious, it being a Godzilla movie, I've got no particular memory of this one. I can remember flashes of sitting in front of the TV watching it, but that's about as far as it goes. And I think it was certainly after things like the Godzilla cartoon, if you remember that.
Good lord, yes.
Yeah, Godzuki, Jesus. And the aforementioned Destroy All Monsters, which, as I've said before, was the first actual Toho movie I saw as far as I can recall. But I was well versed in this particular monsterverse even then, enough to consider Destroy All Monsters the Crisis on Infinite Earths type pinnacle. So I had picked it from somewhere, but as far as specific memories, nothing. So what about you? Any memories of the first time you experienced this one, Mike?
My experience is much the same, to be honest. Before I get into that, do you mind if I quickly address the? I've just got a little bit addressing the whole title situation. How this film has two titles, the whole Godzilla Gojira. Do you happy
Yeah,
for me to
go
go
for
into
it.
that? Just I found an interesting little sort of box out in the book that I have about the the history of the Godzilla franchise, and I thought it was interesting. So it just says there's a lot of debate about the title of the original film. Is it Godzilla or is the more accurate title Gojira, based on the Japanese lettering in the film? Sometimes you will encounter a little bit of snobbery around people that are like, oh, it's Gojira. The answer actually is somewhere in the middle. Translating Japanese to English is difficult for a number of reasons, not least of which being that Japanese has phonetic sounds that differ slightly from the English equivalent. As such, certain translations of the original title would read the three Japanese letters as Go, Ji, and Ra. However, that middle letter can often be translated not as G, but as Z. Same with the final letter, since Japanese speakers would pronounce an R sound as an L, that final letter might be pronounced as La. So just as much as it's Gojira, the title of the film and name of the character is also Godzilla. Yes, it's a bit of a Western mispronunciation, but it's also one that Toho themselves recommended as the English translation of the word. So for the purposes of referring to either the title character or this original film itself, it's perfectly acceptable to just use Godzilla. But yeah, we like to show off a little bit that we do know it's Gojira in some places and as a more literal translation.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but no, going back to your initial question, I'm pretty much in exactly the same boat as you. I know that I saw this movie, and yet I can't pin down an exact memory. I have a memory of the first time that I really remember seeing it, and it was because, I don't know if I've mentioned this to you off air, they were doing like a giveaway, as they often did in the newspaper when I used to work for shall we say, news agent and be kind. So they would often give away like free movies, but they would be in like a little cardboard slipcase, just as a single DVD disc. And one of them that one of these broadsheet newspapers gave away was the original Japanese Godzilla. They also gave away King Kong versus Godzilla the following week, and I did get both. So I remember sitting and watching that, and that wasn't that long ago. That was maybe 15 or so years ago. So I'm sitting to watch that and being like, let's sit down and make a point of watching this because it's the the one that started all the big one. And I do recall during sitting down to watch that, I was like, this is very familiar. I really feel like I've seen this before, but I can't. Like I said, I was probably one of those late night things that you mentioned on Channel 4 or something that I just saw it in passing when I was younger and didn't really register what it was or that it was the big first movie. But part of me is starting to wonder if it could even have been like, could I potentially have even seen the American re-edit? And that's why I just recognized scenes that were maybe in that. Because as I say, I haven't actually seen, I don't think, the American edit yet. And I'm going to watch it when we finish the podcast. I didn't want to get it all confused in my head with the Japanese original. But when I watch that, if a lot more things are familiar, then it might be that I saw, Godzilla King of the Monsters, the Americanized version first.
This, as far as this one goes, would you say it's one that you rewatch with any regularity? Or, have your impressions changed since you first saw it?
I think it's a film that, this is probably going to sound really dodgy, but it's a film that you have to be of a certain age and maturity level to really appreciate everything that's here. Certainly if you come to this after seeing a lot of the more knock around, silly type Godzilla movies, it's maybe going to seem a little more slow and boring than you would think the franchise is based on what it became. But it is one that I've now seen a few times. And as I say, I did rewatch it for this because I did buy myself the Criterion Collection Godzilla Showa era box set because I really want to watch them all again, having probably not seen half of them since I was a kid. And so I watched it again on this and was like, this is really blummin' good movie. Spoiler alert for my opinions, but yeah, I mean, I think because I'm old enough to appreciate like the social commentary and what's happening, under the surface, so to speak, no pun intended, with what's going on with the characters and stuff, I thought like, wow, this is really, really good. And not to say that the Godzilla attacks aren't good too, but it also, in a weird way, this kind of, it blends in my head with, because I just saw it recently-ish, with Godzilla -1, because it was only a few months ago that I saw that at the cinema, and there's some striking similarities. I mean, in a lot of ways, -1 is basically a remake of this movie, effectively. Not entirely, but certainly in, enough ways that you could see it as, okay, I can see what you do, and this is this bit, and this is that, etc. And I remember loving that for the same reason. I was like, the attacks are fantastic. Don't get me wrong, with modern effects, they've got it to the point of just unbelievable brilliance. It looks amazing, but it was the character sort of human drama aspect that really pushed it over the edge into a 5-star film for me, Godzilla -1, and like, yeah, it's saying something about post-war Japan and the state of people and all of that stuff, whilst also being a really cool, this dinosaur's eating a train. Yeah.
Yeah, I spoke to that with Nige back on the War of the Gargantuas episode that we did earlier this year, and I've still not seen Godzilla -1. I know it's available to stream where I am now, but I've just not got around to it. But I might
highly
do
recommend
that.
doing so.
Yeah, I might do it after this episode while you're watching Raymond Burr.
Yeah, cool.
So, yeah, I mean, do you, as we stated at the start of this is 70th anniversary of its release, and not many franchises get to that. Do you think it stood the test of time?
I think so. I mean, again, it's a weird one because part of the thing, again, no pun intended, but part of the whole situation here is that this franchise adapts and mutates to different kinds of things, and so, I mean, if you picked up just at random, for argument's sake, like this movie, Godzilla Millennium, Shin Godzilla, and Godzilla -1, they're almost entirely different movies too. If you were to grab, I don't know, Destroy All Monsters or Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla or any of those, Invasion of Astro Monster that got a bit sillier and a bit way too sci-fi based for some. But yet they're all Godzilla movies. You wouldn't say one thing is better than the other thing. It's very adaptable, and well, not just Godzilla. I think that's true of kaiju movies in general. But I think, I mean, come on, it's got to have stood the test of time. It's been adapted into an American thing, not just recut from the Japanese, but they make their own movies now. We tried it in the 90s, and then we've had a slightly more successful run with the Monsterverse that we reviewed, Godzilla versus Kong.
Well, we couldn't go much worse than the 90s version. I was going to ask. Yeah, you've brought up a point there with regards to the Monsterverse. Obviously, you like it. Obviously, we both like it. As seen on the Godzilla versus Kong review that we did, and we'll put a link to that one in this. But yeah, which do you think it's got any chance of kind of holding up against the Japanese, or is the Japanese version your one true love, as it were?
I think, yeah, the Japanese. I mean, the Monsterverse isn't really setting out to do, for the most part, what the Japanese films are doing. Having said that, I think you could probably put the 2014 Godzilla, the American made, was it Gareth Edwards? Up against most of the Japanese ones. I don't personally like that it keeps, Big G off screen for quite so long, but I also appreciate, like I said, that there's more to these movies in the best instances than just the giant monster fights and stuff. So I think that's one that could potentially stand up to the best, more dramatic Toho Godzilla movies. But otherwise, like I said, the Monsterverse seems like after that, really what it's trying to be is more the stuff you mentioned, the kind of destroy all monsters, the let's throw as many monsters into the screen and not worry too much about, human drama or impact. They're just there to move us to the next time King Kong suplexes Godzilla into a pyramid or whatever,
Yeah. I've got to say, I mean, we brought this up during that review of Kong versus Godzilla, and I do love that Gareth Edwards one. It's got a similar vibe to me that this one has to the rest of the Godzilla going forward. As you mentioned earlier, it gets a bit silly at some point. And this one is obviously very serious, and I did like that with Gareth Edwards' first take on this, and I do kind of grieve for the way it could have gone. Obviously, I'm in the minority, and people much prefer the straight up adventures and comedic aspects of the franchise as it is now. But yeah, I always felt that one kind of held up. So yeah, let's bearing that in mind, let's jump straight into the writing of this one, seeing as we're on the tone. And so what do you think to the writing of this one?
I think it's another situation where there's, again, a lot more going on than you may necessarily think, and I'm not going to insult the audience's intelligence to say that you may not know that this is all about it's a big allegory for nuclear. I mean, I think that's pretty straightforward, even as basic as film fans can watch this and pretty much pick up on the subtext in that one. But there's a little bit more going on because there's more, like I said, there seems to be more caretaking for the human characters, not just in terms of, the ones that have had to suffer through the war, although that is an important part, and the people that have had to sort of see, the nuclear devastation that happened and the incident that sparked this film, which I'm sure you're probably going to mention, the whole Lucky Dragon #5 incident.
Yeah.
So yeah, people that live through that, but also, and I mean, yeah, there is some great stuff with that. Like I do always remember the kind of, I don't know if you would call it sort of a sad irony of the woman that's like, I survived Nagasaki by minutes, only to now find myself killed by Godzilla. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a horrible. I mean, you want to laugh, but at the same time, it's tragic. But it's not just about that. Like I said, you've also got like the love triangle part, which gives a human element in a really real way to what's going on. Not about war or not about the giant monster, and it's compelling enough. I personally found it compelling anyway. The idea that she had this loyalty to Sarazawa, but she only ever really cared for him as a brother, that being Amiko, and yet she cared for this other chap who was family friend and whatever else. And yeah, I mean the fact that turns into a really noble, almost Casablanca-esque, okay, I'm going to step aside, I hope you're happy together kind of thing by the end. I was like, it's almost as its own little film within the film that's
Yeah. I was
well
gonna,
written as well.
yeah, I was gonna say that. I mean, a downfall of a lot of these movies, especially the later ones, you really couldn't care less about the human angle. You just want to get to the monsters trashing each other over cities and stuff. But it is, as you say, really compelling. It's a damn good story, almost to the point where when it does cut away to things involving, plot A, you kind of going, oh, I want to see what's going on. And I think it's a testament to the writing of that one.
Yeah, and when it all comes together with the kind of use of the oxygen destroyer, and that's where your A and B plots intersect, it's really interesting. It's just very compelling, a lot more so than it potentially could have been, because some of those moments are, let's be honest, acted like a American daytime soap.
Yeah.
But you kind of forgive it because the stakes are what they are, and like I said, that it's the combination of these two plot lines coming together.
Going to what you were saying with regards to that Lucky Dragon, just to give people a background, it was inspired by the real-life Lucky Dragon number 5 incident, where the crew of a Japanese fishing boat of that name were contaminated by radioactive fallout from the US Castle Bravo hydrogen bomb test. It was the detonation of the first such bomb. Now, this event generated much controversy in Japan, especially after the death of the ship's radio man. So, as Mike said, it's very much based on real-life events to a certain extent. And
in the intro of the film basically just replays that, doesn't it? When you think about it,
it does, and it is done really effectively. With regards to how it's written, there are some scenes in this, and I'm going to avoid going into it too much because then we're skipping over to the direction. But there are some scenes in this which are just awful. It's more like a war movie. The name Gojira is a combination of the Japanese words for gorilla, Gorira, and whale, Kujira. The monster is said to have been named because it's alluded to a creature of great size and strength. And while this is the first Godzilla film, the character's real media debut was The Monster Godzilla, which was a radio drama aired on Nippon Broadcasting and based on Murata's first draft of the film, and it aired from July 17th to September 25th, 1954. So he's this story had a lot of kind of build up to it. So, but there's the writing in this. I don't know. It reminded me very much of the Gareth Edwards one, and a lot of the time, for the first 45 minutes, it's just basically talking about the monster. You don't really see it, and I love the tension. I love the build up about this, and I think it does it really well.
Apologies if you had any audio interference there, everyone. We were just trying to. DK is having some overheating issues with technology, but we're working on it. So hopefully you can get a slightly smoother sound now.
As usual, I'm recording on the surface of the sun.
I actually made a note of it. It is minute 22 out of an hour and 36 before you see the monster. But it doesn't feel like it because, like you say, it's kind of talked about. It's the focus of everything, and the human drama is interesting enough to keep you interested without feeling bored and like, oh, where's the monster? Where's it coming from? So I mean, when it does appear for the first time, it's by modern standards pretty laughable, to be honest. When its head's poking over the kind of mountain, and the woman screams, and all I can personally think about, because I'm of that generation, is, oh, that guy wants his chewits.
Oh my god! Oh my god! More
So,
chewy than an 18-story block of flats. Yeah. Looking at it from a modern perspective, it is very much a Kit and Kong from the Goodies kind of effect.
yeah.
But
At times it's fantastic, but there's just the
you,
odd moment where you're like, yeah, that's a rear projection and it shows, yeah. Or that's a
it's
model and it really shows,
yeah. But I mean, I often say this at the time
Oh yeah,
when you're sat in a cinema watching this. That must have been something else.
absolutely. And a lot of the actual stuff with the man in a suit where it's not rear projection, it is fantastic. Like I said, it's unfortunate that we've got such an eye for models and stuff because it is a bit Jerry Anderson, but at the same time, viewers watching it wouldn't have thought that's not a real city, that's a model city. You just, you don't think about it like that. And again, I think it's just because we're so desensitized by years of seeing behind the scenes of how these things were done.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, we're there, so we might as well, if you want, if you're all right with it, unless you've got any more notes on the writing, jump onto the production design because it is a big part of this. So you all right with doing that, mate, or do you have anything else on regards to the writing?
Yeah, I mean, I had a couple of little. I just wanted to note a couple of things as well with the writing. It's fantastically written, but every now and then there was just a little line that made me laugh that I wanted to chuck in. So it's sometimes just things that are like really impactful. So it doesn't have to be like funny. So things like the sea just exploded, where I'm just like, yeah, that's a very poetic way of putting it. Or my favorite two, the most obvious ones in the world. The first one being this footprint is radioactive, which is just I want that on a t-shirt. and, and most importantly is when they put up a picture that they've got of what we've just seen, Godzilla towering over the mountain, and somebody just says this is a photo of the creature's head, and I've just written in my notes, no shit, Sherlock.
Yeah.
What did we think it was?
Weirdly enough, one of the original designs for Godzilla, he had a head shaped like a mushroom cloud.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, though, Subaraya originally wanted it to be an octopus. He'd later get his wish to have an octopus in King Kong versus Godzilla, and in a cutscene in Frankenstein Conquers the World, and finally in our old favourite War of the Gargantuas. But
Yes.
yeah, on this one, while it was always assumed to be made of rubber, the original Godzilla suit was, according to Nakajima, made from a ready-mix concrete mixture due to the limited supply.
According to the book I've got, it was made of bamboo.
Oh God, yeah, it says a ready-mix concrete mixture, and it was due to obviously the limited supply of latex in post-war Japan, but it was nearly impossible to use, resulting in a second suit being made using a liquid plastic polymer. So yeah, we've both
Yes,
kind of got the
I've got
same
it
thing,
made
but
of
different routes.
I've got that. Suit actors Haruo Nakajima and Katsumi Tezuka were often absolutely exhausted by carrying around the suit made of heavy urethane and bamboo, which was not pleasant.
Yeah, this is, I've got it here that it was so hot inside that Nakajima would frequently faint. Temperatures inside the suit reached up to 60 degrees or 140 Fahrenheit, if you're of that persuasion, due to the hot studio lights, and it wasn't uncommon for him to come out with at least 1 cup of sweat drained from the suit each filming day. That must have been, unbearable.
Oh, nightmarish! Yeah.
Yeah. So, George Lucas apparently cites this film's miniatures as an inspiration for his special effects methods on Star Wars. So, make of that what you will.
That's not true. These didn't look like terrible digital effects.
Okada shot first. Yeah, stop motion animation that was rejected because of the amount of time that it would take to get right. Subaraya really wanted to use that method, but had to face reality that there was just not enough people in Japan with enough experience in this technique, and Toho would never give him the time he needed due to the production schedule. There were some elements for stop motion, but I think there's one scene in particular that stands out where Godzilla whips his tail when he's in that when he comes on land and starts destroying Tokyo. But for the most part, it was dropped in favour of the suit work.
To your point, yeah, I did read somewhere, and apologies if I'm stepping on something that you were going to say. I read somewhere that the reason that they decided to make Godzilla instead of the other films that fell through was because of the success of the re-release of King Kong, which Honda and everyone involved was really beloved. That film, really loved that film, I should say, and also the re-release of The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, which had also happened, and it also kind of kicked off the love of these kinds of things, and that's why they kind of, I think, wanted to do it in stop motion, because they'd seen that was successful there. But like you said, it just wasn't going to work for Japan, and so they pioneered a whole new thing instead.
Yeah, yeah. When it comes to like Nakajima, he'd frequently visit the zoo to study movements of large animals to enhance his performance, and he himself did watch Subaraya's personal print of the film King Kong, because So yeah, I do like the fact that I know that as you're watching it, you can obviously tell that they're trying to cover some of the shortcomings of the effects by setting quite a lot of it at night, and I think it works really well.
I think the fact that it's black and white also helps, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the only time that it did look kind of suspect is at the end with the oxygen destroyer, and it fades into that. I guess the corpse. But
I kind of accept it just as a kind of it's not literal. You've just kind of got to read that maybe as it's a representation. I don't know. I didn't really mind. Sorry.
I'm not going to go on a whole rant about kids today, but yeah, if someone's grown up watching pioneering digital effects as things like Jurassic Park and stuff like that, they're obviously going to look at this with a certain derision. And
yeah, it's a shame though, because this, I mean, a lot of the future stuff that came along wouldn't happen without this. I mean, it pioneered stuff that, even if it's not necessarily working or we've moved on to the next thing, they wouldn't exist without these things. And a lot of the people that are responsible for more modern effects probably grew up watching these and wanting to emulate these,
Yeah, I mean, I've got one here for you. The US version, King of the Monsters, was cited as an inspiration by Spielberg. In the book The Making of Jurassic Park, Spielberg described how Godzilla, of course, was the most masterful of all the dinosaur movies because it made you believe it was really happening. He'd also draw connections to how this film used its monster as a thematic metaphor. So yeah, as you say, if not for things like this, I don't think we'd have had later things like that. But to me, it's. Again, whether it's because we grew up with such, dodgy effects and they were par for the course, it doesn't take anything away from this. I can sit and watch this, and unlike some, I'm not just going to be sat there laughing at the puppets, as it were.
Yeah, it's a cultural thing as well. I mean, there's aspects of no theatre, spelled NOH, in the kind of Suitmation idea that I think Japanese are a lot more accepting of without ridiculing it. And that's why, I mean, even today, you still have man in a suit type things on TV and film in Japan, and they don't really kind of look on it as, oh, this isn't very good. I mean, you're not necessarily going to be seeing that in Godzilla films, but, your TV movies and stuff like that, it still employs these techniques just the same way.
And in a lot of respects, to me, I mean, we harp on about this so often that we should make this a drinking game, but physical effects, to me, they still far outweigh digital effects. It's got that solidity to it. So as clumsy as it can be when Godzilla's traipsing through the electrical wires with the pylons, I'd still rather that than some of the you look back at the early 90s attempts at CG and it's dated so badly compared to this, and this one still, to me, really kind of holds up.
Yeah, it's even got a charm when it doesn't work, because I find it like faintly amusing, but also I kind of love it when he's attacking the TV tower and you get the TV guy going, this could be the end, it's going to be the end of us, and the guy in the suit is desperately trying to look like he's doing something, to claw onto something or to bite into something, and it's just not quite working.
Again, I'm going back to chew it.
I love this. Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I do think it holds up incredibly well. But I think without Honda's direction, because Honda's direction, he really does kind of do a good job on this. I don't know what
But he's Mr. Godzilla. I think he's directed more than any other, hasn't he? And he started it. He did. At the very least, I know he did this, and he did the last film in the Showa era. I think Terror of Mechagodzilla, something like that. But I know there's a good few in between, and like I said, he's the guy. He's the equivalent of he's the equivalent of Kevin Feige to the Godzilla movies, I guess, in some ways.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a straight, because he's actually a director, but you know what I mean. It's like the guy that you associate the most with it, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I loved the fact that it's. Again, we're going back to the theme of the thing, but it is shot almost, like I said, like a war movie. I mean, there's one scene after Godzilla's destruction of Japan where there's just lines of injured people lying on stretchers from his rampage. You know, there's that scene with the children as they're trying to locate the parents, and
there's the scene with the mother that's comforting the kids, and she's like, "Oh, don't worry, we'll soon be where Daddy is." And the implication is obviously he died during the war, and they're about to die. And scenes like that are really harrowing, and they also just constantly jar with me with the idea that like 2 or 3 movies later, this force of destruction would become like Japan's national mascot. Godzilla would become the hero of Japan, when it's like he's presented here as such a force of like, you're killing kids and stuff, you know.
Yeah, I did think that. I thought, I in later movies, do you never just see the protesters going, "No, he's evil and still must be destroyed"? It is a very big tonal shift, when you get to later movies, and he is, as you say, the champion. And here it's just because as I'm watching it this time, I thought, is it are they going to be rescued last minute? And it just cuts away from them, and you think maybe not then. And it's as you say, it's it leads to a very visceral kind of response, because you just think, oh, this is a disaster movie. This is a war movie. This isn't the Godzilla that we grew up with. You know what I mean?
It's realistic as well. I mean, as much as don't get me wrong, I love 3-headed space dragons made of gold or whatever. But there's a realism to a scene in here where you get people complaining that the subways are always late, all these commuters, and then seconds later just killed by Godzilla. And there's a realism and a horror to that that's far stronger than a giant spider emerging from the ocean or whatever.
Yeah. It's I mean one of the things that he did do, obviously he did an Ed Wood before Ed Wood was around, and he used a lot of live footage. The troops going to the coast to face Godzilla, they were actual Japanese self-defense force troops. They were on maneuvers when Honda shot the footage. So it's there is that kind of verisimilitude there, because he's using actual military people, and it blows me on. I'm not gonna lie. When I sat down to watch it, I thought, oh God, I'll be honest, I really wasn't in the mood, and I thought, oh, this is gonna be like 2 hours of drudgery. Sometimes I can be in the mood for a black and white movie, sometimes I'm not in the mood, and it just flew by. Because I don't think it ever kind of lets up. And in the part where Godzilla isn't there, you are kept interested in the movie by whatever B-plot, or, with the love triangle, or what's happening with the father. I think Honda did really, really well. And it's interesting because apparently Toho released 68 feature films in 54. And the most successful were this, Seven Samurai, and Samurai Eye Musashi Miyoto. Ironically enough, these were also the most expensive movies that Toho had ever made, and it caused some to speculate that Toho almost went bankrupt from Godzilla. I mean, they do deny that to this day. However, apparently they were only able to afford to make such productions because of their ability to sell these films overseas to foreign markets. It was a huge gamble. But yeah, I mean, the proof's in the pudding, and the fact that Honda directed this, no wonder his star rose. If you see what I mean.
Absolutely. They address this in the book that I've got about the Godzilla movies as well, where they say that it's the Godzilla movies more than anything else that's responsible for bringing Japanese cinema to the West. And as much as you can admire, how pivotal and seminal movies like Seven Samurai are, it's the Godzilla movies that have made exponentially more than the kind of art house Japanese cinema.
Yeah, apparently Kurosawa would
Yeah.
repeatedly show up on set to watch the film being made because he was a lifelong friend of Honda, and
Yeah.
he included this film in his all-time favorite films.
Definitely, and a lot of the actors I think were shared between from Kurosawa films. Certainly, I read that the older professor, the father who doesn't want to kill Godzilla, was an actor who'd been in I think Seven Samurai or something like that.
Yeah, and during filming of Seven Samurai, Tsuchiya he'd frequently walk off the set just so he could watch him making Godzilla, and he really wanted to work on the film but couldn't due to his commitment to Kurosawa, and he was later cast in the first sequel, Gigantis the Fire Monster. So it.
Please just call it Godzilla Raids again. It is not called Gigantis the Fire Monster.
What I do like about it is that it was never. We've said ourselves that people can be incredibly dismissive, and when you first see Godzilla appearing over the hill, yeah, it looks dodgy. But to me,
look, I just had a craving for Chewits. Leave me alone.
To me, it's the tension is broken by that, and to me, it's still kind of a powerful image.
Oh yeah,
and
the woman screaming is iconic. God.
And what gets me is that it was never looked down upon. Where you look at Western cinema and you look at the Oscars, and 9 times out of 10 they will ignore anything that's fantasy or science fiction based and stick to your dramas and your thrillers and that kind of stuff, because genre movies are very much looked down on. And while doing the research for the behind the scenes and stuff like that, you never get that impression. They take it as a kind of serious art form, and I do.
It's beloved in Japan. It's beloved here. Godzilla has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Yes, I did see that. I was kind of hyped for that. 2004.
Yeah, and finally won an Oscar just last year after 70 years of waiting. Thanks to Godzilla -1.
-1, yeah. You mentioned the train sequence. And yeah, it does look a bit flimsy, but it's still kind of harrowing because you see all those passengers on the train, and the next thing, it's just a write-off. It doesn't, especially for its time, it doesn't pull any punches. Nobody really kind of gets out of this. It's not like when you look at Ogata, when you look at Serizawa, when you look at Amiko and her father and stuff like that. If you see later movies, you expect them to have a certain kind of plot armor. I don't think you have that in this. Nobody seems safe in this, and I think that's one of the things that is kind of shocking.
Yeah, absolutely, and just how brutal the film is, as you said. I don't want to harp on too much because we've kind of said it, but yeah, watching it, particularly if you've watched a lot of Godzilla movies and you're expecting something a bit more kitsch, it's surprisingly brutal, and it's the one that's, I think, the strongest allegory for, like you say, the nuclear bombs and nuclear fallout hitting Japan and just what it did to them,
Yeah, it does kind of dwell on that at several points. It does get pretty on the nose at times when he's saying, the H bomb and the A bomb and then the H bomb and then the oxygen destroyer and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, well, I like that though. I like that morality of like we've already invented things that are just horrible. In hope that we're going to stalemate and never use things like the H-bomb and whatever. But if I use the oxygen destroyer, that's introducing yet another, and he uses the words weapon of mass destruction, which triggers something, because of what we lived through with the whole, Iraq Bush Blair situation, hearing that phrase really triggers something in me. And I'm like, oh, wow, they were using that phrase in 1954. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I do think as well, I like the approach that they take in that it doesn't spoon feed the audience. It doesn't treat them as idiots, and I'm specifically thinking of the flashback sequence when it actually shows you what went on in Serizawa's laboratory, and then when they do go back and he changes his mind and he starts burning his notes,
Yeah.
And then he says, we're not going to let it fall into anyone else's hands. And then Amiko looks at him and she kind of puts two and two together of what he's suggesting, and she just kind of breaks down crying. And I
Yeah.
do love that because it doesn't feel the need to tell the audience what they're going to do. It
Yeah.
it allows them to come to that same realization at the same time as Amiko does, and I think it does that really well. It doesn't treat the audience like idiots, which I think occasionally some of the later movies do. Some of the later kaiju movies do. There's a lot of poignancy in this movie, and I
Yeah.
think it does it extremely well, even down to the ending.
Yes.
It's
Oh, I love that
yeah,
ending so much.
they do stop Godzilla, but it's not a it's a Pyrrhic victory, as it were.
I mean,
It's
if this film came out today, and I know we say this all the time, that last line would have been crucified for being woke. When you actually have Professor Yamane saying, "Yes, we destroyed Godzilla, but if we keep on going with these H bombs and bigger bombs, then another Godzilla is going to awaken, and it'll be all of our heads." And you just kind of feel like, yeah, people today would just look at that and go, "Ah, you dodgy liberal," but it's
yeah,
an
you
important
preaching.
message.
Yeah, this is what makes me laugh about when people sort of. Can you remember when films didn't used to preach, and you look at this and you just think peasants.
Yeah. Remember when films didn't have an anti-war message like 1954 when they clearly did?
Yeah, it just nuts. Yeah, so I mean, that kind of brings us on to the acting. So when when he accepted the role, he assumed the suit would be similar in nature to the samurai armor used in To's period films. He really had no idea. Uh, and this was Takarada who played Ogata. Sorry, it was his first starring role after appearing just in mainly in small supporting roles. But he was originally cast as Serizawa, and Akiko Hirata was originally cast as Ogata. Apparently, Honda felt that Hirata was more suited for the darker, tragic hero of Serizawa. Therefore, Honda had the two actors switch roles. So,
I can see
yeah,
where
I
he's
think
coming from because that particularly Hirata as Serizawa, I think, is a very moody, menacing kind of presence that I don't think you would have had the other way
no,
around.
no. I Amiko had a tendency to kind of overdo it sometimes, but I think for the most part, a lot of the performances are kind of restrained. Not so
Yeah,
much. Not so
I
much.
don't. Yeah. I don't blame Makoko Kochi because, like I said, it's that period in time where you were
Yeah.
kind of like, you want an Oscar, don't you, darling? Act bigger, kind of thing. So I don't put it on her necessarily.
No, no. I mean, the only other one that I can think was slightly outrageous was the reporter dude as well.
Oh,
He
that
was
was
kind.
OTT, but that was beautifully OTT. Like I said, the fact that you've got Godzilla struggling to actually get a grip on this tower to look like he's destroying it, and then this over-the-top news reporter that's like, "It's the end. I'm going
Farewell.
out. Farewell. I remember my childhood romping through the fields." That guy was milking his 15 minutes of fame, you know.
Oh, definitely, definitely. But yeah, for the most part, I think they did really well. Takashima Shimura as the professor, I
It's,
thought did
yeah,
really
Yamane.
well.
Yeah, that was a character I just didn't get. To be honest, and it was the only one that I didn't fully connect with, just because I didn't understand. Because, okay, I get it. He's like seen too much death and destruction, and he's old enough to have lived through, at least one war, and so he doesn't want to kill Godzilla. And so initially, I was like, is he just like the representative of all bleeding heart liberals? Even though this destruction's happening, and then tends to it seems to pivot that to just like, no, I just want to study him because he's able to withstand the H bomb, and so if we can figure out how, then maybe we can develop a defense against it, kind of thing. And so yeah, it just felt weird throughout, and then he felt weirdly distant and odd. And then you had
Yeah,
that whole scene where Ogata
the
like talking about destroying Godzilla, and he's like, "Get out of my house! We don't destroy this
yeah.
thing." Oh.
I was watching that and I'm like, because it was just like, I'm gonna ask for your hand in marriage, and then that happened. I'm like, oh boy,
Done messed up, boy.
yeah. Uh, they did seem to kind of shy away from him in that last third. I think it's simply because of the fact that there was a decision made that they're gonna have to kill this thing, and so it
Hmm.
just kind of shied away from any responses he had, which I thought was a bit of a shame.
That's the thing as well. Though, as much as I adore his last line, and I really do, I think for something that he was so angry about, he's throwing people out of his house about killing Godzilla. He witnesses it happening, and he's just like, ah, well, we defeated him, but what if another? And I'm like, you don't seem remotely bothered about this one.
No, it did seem a bit of a change in personality towards the end, and that seemed a bit of a loss. But I guess
he seemed to flip flop a lot about like what you're supposed to actually read from him, and I could never get a read on the character other than he was just weird.
yeah, turn the light off. I'm going to sit here in the dark.
Yeah, exactly. It's just weird.
Have you got anything else with regards to the performances in this?
No, we've talked about all of it. It's you just said basically all what I had down, so I can't really elaborate any further than that. I don't think.
Fair enough. Which takes us to, I mean, pretty much the only thing left to cover, which is sound design and the soundtrack. Have you got anything with regards to that?
I only really have one note, which is that I absolutely love this Godzilla theme. It's truly iconic, and it sticks in my mind every time I've seen this. It's the primary thing that I remember.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's. I ask this on every episode. I think I'm going to end up stopping asking this soon. But, yeah. It's cult classic, yes or no?
I mean, this is one of the definitions of a cult classic.
Yeah.
Like you say, the fact is, even if it wasn't as influential and epic as it is, it's a foreign film, which is, by nature, they're kind of cult because, it's not in English. You might have to do some reading.
Yeah.
So,
I ain't going to the cinema to read.
Exactly. Let's just see the big dinosaur and shut up.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why it got redone, obviously, as King of the Monsters, because the audience were just like, reading?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a cult classic.
Completely.
You know,
it's one of the... If there was a Mount Rushmore of cult classics, I think it's a strong contender. And I mean, if you're a monster movie fan, it's, King Kong, Godzilla are the first two things you would immediately go to,
Yeah. He's globally known. I mean, I don't think there's anybody around the globe that if you use the word Godzilla, they wouldn't know what you're talking about.
Again, and the star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Exactly. But, and the fact that when it was first released, it wasn't reviewed very well. It wasn't looked upon with any great reverence. It didn't do particularly amazing. And it's only just over the years and, the reputation and the sequels. And it is the epitome of a cult classic. It's to the point where, as I mentioned in the production notes, they've gone back and actually reappraised the original film. And when Criterion are touching it, it's gone up in the world.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the box set is full of, multiple letter film historian professors commenting on these things as genuine works of art. So, yeah, absolutely.
And as we mentioned earlier, the fact that it's inspired so many with their own projects. So, yeah, what's your favourite thing about this one? I mean, is there any aspect stands out for you? And again, as always, it could be something technical, right down to a scene or piece of dialogue.
It's probably going to be exhausting for people to hear, and I don't know if necessarily everybody else would agree. Certainly, I know a certain right-wing section wouldn't agree, but for me, the strongest part about it is the allegorical nature of it. Again, we've talked about this ad nauseum, but being Star Trek fans, we are suckers for, disguising big real-world themes and echoing them by using sci-fi, to disguise what you're actually saying. And I think this is one of the most... This should be studied as one of the best examples of, it doesn't show Japan getting hit by a nuclear bomb. It shows it getting hit by a giant monster, but it might as well be showing you Japan being hit by a bomb because it's basically the same effect, and yet it's more entertaining. And it launched a franchise because it did the whole monster movie thing, and it was clever enough to, I don't think this would have quite took off the way it did if it was just, man in suit monster attacking a city at random. I think it's because it ties into how Japan was feeling at that time and the anti-nuclear sentiment and what it could represent. I think that's the reason that it still is quite as powerful today.
Yeah, I've pretty much got the same thing. I mean, how basing it off such let's be honest, awful real world events.
Oh yeah,
it brings a new viewing to it, and to me, it takes it to another level. I mean, it is realism insofar as a kaiju movie can be considered real, and yeah, so. I agree with you on that one, dude.
Cool.
So, yeah, those are our personal highlights of this one, but what about you out there? What did you think of the OG? As always, we're going to head over to our resident feedback specialist with your opinions. And how are you doing?
Hey DK, so it looks like there's quite a lot of fondness for the ultimate movie monster. There are a lot of reviews. Unfortunately for me personally, I have the brain rot from the 1997 Roland Emmerich vehicle, and I cannot think about Godzilla without hearing the phrase, "It's Gojira, you moron!" From that awful, awful film. But love classic Godzilla, and you know how I love my lizard, so I'm going to pick and choose because there is a lot of feedback. Everybody loves Godzilla. Starting with Bob Peritano, all caps. Yes, love it. Ursula Digel Wishin, this is my number one favorite movie. It gets all the stars. Philip Garnecki, 5 stars. It stands alongside the 1933 King Kong as the absolute best monster movie ever made. And while the original Japanese version is superior, the American version is no hatchet job. It's actually very effective and well done. High praise indeed from Philip. Janelle Bennett, yes, magnifique. Tyler Pollock and Jason Gunther both say 5 out of 5. Mario Velez, I have both versions. Love it. Robert Essert, 5+ stars, an Amazon movie. Not sure what that means, but I'm sure he'll explain it to us. Let's see. Kurt Machemel, it's only the start of the greatest movie franchise of all time, and that's a great point, Kurt. Ken Rowland actually gives it 10 out of 5 stars with a nice smiley face here. And Pete Rodriguez, 100% with a nice pointy emoji at us. Marty Pryler, Gojira gets 6 stars out of 5. People are loving this movie and the start of this franchise. And, you know, Godzilla's the king of the monsters for a reason. I argue better than King Kong. Peter Jackson might have something to say about that. Bart McClintock has both versions on DVD and enjoys both of them. Ralph Preedy, again, 100%. And that pointy finger emoji. Let's see what else. Ryan Haremsky, I love the original Godzilla. It's my favorite Godzilla movie and favorite all-time movie. I love the Japan version the best with a dinosaur and a blue heart emoji. Charles Palmer, 10 stars. Terrence O'Connell, Gojira gets a 5. King of the Monsters gets a 4. I don't care for the rest. I haven't seen -1 because that sounds like the score for the other sequels. Winky face. Terrence, it's okay. You're allowed to feel that way. Paul Moorhead and Gary Rains both give it a 5. Derek Perry gives it a 5, says it's an absolute masterpiece. Rhonda Haynes, 5 stars. Star. It is the movie that started it all, heart. Teresa Graves, I've watched every single Gojira movie ever made. My ultimate guilty pleasure. People just love Godzilla. It is a classic for a reason, and I hope to see much more of it in the coming years. So with that, back to you, DK.
Nice one. Seems like it's another popular one that still holds up for a lot of you. Thank you as always for going through those for us. And thank you to you out there for letting us know your thoughts. As always, you're still free to do so, either on the description for this episode or on our socials, which will flash up later for those of you watching. For those listening in, links to all of these, including Letterboxd, can be found in our link tree in the description. Which means the only thing left for us here in the studio, quotation marks, is to give our final thoughts on this one. And if you're a regular to Cult Classics, you'll know that each of us here gives a small conclusion and score out of 5, which will then collate into a final silver screen score. So without further ado, we'll begin. And we'll start with you, Mike. So go for it, dude.
Okay, again, apologies if this is a bit long-winded. As I said, I started getting better at my conclusions and then they got out of hand again. But I've just said, what can you say about this movie that hasn't already been said? It's easy to see how the action scenes and monster destruction wowed at the time, and they're still really enjoyable now, even if things get a bit Jerry Anderson at times. You can only suspend your disbelief so far, but at the same time, I absolutely admire the ambition and the sense of scale and the amount of action that they went for. But there's more here than just Big G, and I think that's what truly makes this film shine as a classic. I'm sick of hearing that nobody goes to monster movies for the human characters when you have proof right back here at the start that a compelling, emotionally resonant human story adds so much to the film overall. I'm not just talking about the obvious nuclear allegory either, but things like the love triangle, the different motivations and attitudes to Godzilla, the moral wrestling with the use of a weapon of mass destruction. it's hard to call the film perfect because we've seen improvements on the things here, perfected effects and acting, things like that. There's also a very dour and serious tone that, while I think it fits this movie perfectly, doesn't really give any indication of the fun that this franchise could and will be at times. That said, it's a film that's undeniably brilliant, seminal, important, groundbreaking for 1954, and I do think it's a movie that everybody should definitely see at least once. And I give it 4.5 out of 5.
Yeah, I've got it's a movie that spawned 1,000 imitations, but very few have lived up to the original. Gojira delivers a monster movie based on very deep, very real-world fears. It's easy to look back on this 70 years later and be dismissive, but at the time, this was based on generational trauma, and despite its age, it still carries a powerful message to this day. It's far from the tongue-in-cheek adventure stories the franchise would eventually become, and is, in some respects, quite harrowing. There's some decent performances and interesting direction from Honda. It makes it a movie that all kaiju fanatics should see. It may not look as glossy as the modern iterations, but it still stands up with an execution fitting to its origins, and I've given it 4 out of 5. So, yeah, which means by averaging it out, it gives, I think you'll know on this one, Mike, already.
Yeah, I think I can work on it without a calculator this time.
Yeah, it gives it a cult classic score of 4.25 which I think is pretty fair, don't you?
That's fair enough, yeah. Can't argue with that.
Yeah, I mean, in all fairness, this one movie, it's blossomed not only a mega franchise, but an entire subgenre of movie, so I think our score aside, it's definitely one of the classics, no matter how you look at it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it for us this time around. As always, it's been an absolute pleasure. All that remains is to thank my guest for joining me on this one. So Mike, cheers for pitching in one on this one again, mate. Always a good chat.
You're welcome. I wonder where they're going to go with those Godzilla babies in Madison Square Garden next.
Oh, the furnace, hopefully. I'm going to go through what's coming up shortly, but do you want to tell our watchers / listeners about what's going on over on our sister Hit or Miss channel and where they can reach us?
Yeah, at the moment, we have a sister channel, as you probably know, Hit or Miss Star Trek, and at the moment we are currently looking at, let's say, divisive, controversial episodes. Some would argue bad episodes of Star Trek, but hopefully at least making for an entertaining review. And yeah, we're looking at everything from transporter malfunctions to ghost sex candles. So do join us over there if you're interested in any of those things. And as usual, you can always find us, myself, DK, and the podcasts all over the internet at the places you'll be able to see on screen, because I will edit in the little screen that shows you them all. Or if you're not watching this on YouTube, you can just use the link tree in the episode's description to find all of our social medias, or I will put our Letterboxd links in the description as well as hopefully I'll remember to put a link to our previous 2 episodes of this monster trilogy, which will be our Godzilla vs. Kong review from a few months back and our recent King Kong review over on Cinema Classics. And other than that, yeah, just over to you for the month of monsters, DK, that you're kind of pioneering.
Awesome, yeah, we'll put all the links in the description. So once more, a big thanks for that, Mike. And also a big thank you to you out there for joining us. We hope you had fun this episode, and if you have, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. We do appreciate every bit of help we receive. We consider this just as much your show as it is ours, so everything you do to help us spread the word, we're very grateful for. And if you do have any suggestions or movies you'd like to see us cover, assuming we haven't already, then please drop us a line on any of those aforementioned socials. We'll hopefully see you real soon. That's right. You won't have to miss us for too long. As I mentioned at the start of the episode, for the next month, we're going weekly for our Silver Screen Month of Monsters. Spend some time with us next week as we head forward to the 60s, and this time we're heading over to the UK for Cult Classic's first ever Hammer horror movie. So join myself and newbie guests Neil and Michelle as we investigate the mystery that is Quatermass and the Pit. And if you haven't heard of that one, please do go and check that out before coming back to us. It's a very, very good one. So until then, we'll be counting the days until you're back in our lives once more. So enjoy the rest of your week, and remember, you can try to avoid dangerous waters, but anything could happen.
Ooh, yes, we've ended this podcast, but there will be another.
You have been listening to the Cult Classics Show, part of the Silver Screen Podcast, created, written, and hosted by DK. produced and edited by Mike Wilson. Feedback section produced by Lady VN. Opening credits by Ian Sanderson. Music by Timeless Journey. Follow us on social media. Links to all of our social media pages can be found on our link tree. This podcast is part of the Mike's Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for Silver Screen Podcast or Mike's Podcasts. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Thank you for joining us. We hope to see you next time. And remember, no matter where you go, there you are.